They thought it was a cave-in at first, a geological shift in the remote Antarctic excavation zone, known only to a handful of unacknowledged scientists and defense agencies. A place absent from every satellite map, protected not by secrecy, but by silence so deep even the most paranoid global powers had forgotten it existed, till the signal pulsed from beneath the ice. Rhythmic, deliberate, undeniably intelligent. The frequency matched nothing on any human record, but it mirrored ancient distortions captured decades earlier in the failed Apollo 18 deep space transmission. Now classified as Rift Codex 0, a piece of alien language so alien it wasn't even language, more like thought carved into radiation, and so they summoned the one man insane enough to believe he could decode it, Dr. Corin Vale. Former xenolinguist, former government asset, current outcast, branded a lunatic after claiming that Earth was not humanity's origin, but its punishment. He arrived at the ice trench with only a canvas satchel, eyes hollowed by obsession, and within hours, standing at the edge of the dig site. He knew they'd found it the vault, or as he had called it in his banned lectures, the womb of silence. The place where an ancient intelligence had been entombed long before Homo sapiens walked upright, a prison not of concrete or chains but of conceptual lockboxes encoded into the very fabric of the Earth's magnetic field, meant to contain not a creature, but a paradox. When the team breached the final crystalline layer with high-frequency laser drills, a pulse of gravity inverted the air, causing birds 200 miles away to fly backward and compasses to spin in figure eights. Then the vault opened, revealing a chamber so dark the lights bent around it, the walls seamless and curved, humming with something deeper than sound. And in the center stood a figure, upright, inside a translucent pod filled with silver fluid that moved like mercury, but pulsed like blood, and the figure was human, or at least it looked human male. Early 30s, eyes closed, not floating, standing, as if he'd simply been paused, mid-breath, mid-thought, mid-life. Carved into the interior of the pod, glowing in shifting alien glyphs that translated directly into the minds of those who gazed too long, was a single message. "You weren't meant to find me yet, Tand." When Corin read it, his nose began to bleed. His memories fractured, and for a moment he remembered dying, though he never had. The others didn't fare much better. 2 scientists collapsed, foaming at the mouth. A third walked calmly into the crevasse, whispering he's dreaming us, and the fourth simply vanished, leaving behind only her shadow burned into the ice wall, like a thermal echo. But Corin stayed, his fractured mind somehow aligning with the entity's psychic resonance. And then the pod cracked, not shattered, but cracked, like a seed opening to light, and the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing with starlight, not metaphorical starlight, literal, like he had stored galaxies in his irises and was remembering where he left them. The room folded inward, pressure imploded, and time-dilated seconds stretched into hours. Memory flowed backwards, and everyone, within a mile, forgot how they got there. Corin alone remained tethered to the moment, watching as the figure stepped forward from the pod, fluid evaporating from his skin like mist. His expression not hostile, not confused, but disappointed, like a teacher waking from centuries of slumber, to find his students had burned the books and crowned themselves kings. He spoke, and though the air remained still, every skull in the room vibrated with his voice. "You're early, which means everything is broken," and with those words, every digital clock within a 500-mile radius froze at 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds, then began counting backward. Satellites above reoriented themselves without command, transmitting data that caused half the observing engineers to suffer seizures. And somewhere in Geneva, an ancient mainframe disconnected from the internet in 1997 came online unprompted, printing the words "He has risen" repeatedly until the paper ran out. Back in the vault, Corin found his voice, trembling as he asked, "Who are you?" And the being looked at him, not with pity, but with something more dangerous, recognition. I am the signal your ancestors silenced, he said. The memory you were programmed to forget, the virus hidden in your myth, the failsafe buried beneath your freedom. And then he whispered a name that didn't exist in any human language, yet somehow echoed in every creation. Myth Aln-Shayar, the dreaming bound, the first rejected, the god who had once been man and had dared to question. The architects before they sentenced him to sleep within the only world chaotic enough to suppress him. Corin staggered backward, pieces clicking into place. The pyramids, the vanished civilizations, the echoes in quantum data, the dreams shared by children across cultures. It had always been him, not a god, but a being we made long before we were human. And now that he had awoken, the world would begin to remember what it was truly for: not to survive, not to thrive, but to contain him. The sky outside the vault dimmed, not from weather, but from awarenesses, if the world itself realized what had been released. And across the planet, those attuned to the ancient frequencies, the blind seers, the dying monks, the last speakers of extinct tongues began to weep uncontrollably, chanting the same word over and over in languages long forgotten, undoing. And as the first arc of starlight bled across Aln-Shayar's reborn skin, he closed his eyes and said, I remember now. I remember why they were afraid of you. Then turned to Corin, smiling like a man who had just found a crack in his cage and a friend on the outside to help him shatter it. Corin didn't run. He couldn't. Not because he was paralyzed, but because something in his mind had shifted, like an internal lock clicking into place. As though some part of him had been waiting for this exact moment his entire life without knowing it. And now, standing before Aln-Shayar, the being who had once been legend and myth, and now stood breathing and alive before him, the world tilted not, metaphorically. Literally, the horizon bent, gravity thinned, and time developed a slow echo that made every breath feel like it lasted a year. Outside the vault, tremors rippled through the ice, but no seismic activity registered on any global sensors, as if the planet itself was experiencing a hallucination so vivid it became real, only to those near its epicenter. Corin stepped forward, shaky but steady, the ancient name burning on the inside of his skull like a brand, and Aln-Shayar turned toward him with eyes that weren't glowing now, but shifting, reflecting not light, but memory, as if the air around him was made of history unraveling. Why were you imprisoned? Corin asked, voice cracking like a man speaking directly into the void. And the being paused, then slowly extended his hand, placing 2 fingers gently on Corin's forehead, not touching flesh, but brushing against thought. And in that instant, Corin saw it, not in images, but in truth. He saw the first architects, beings not of form but of will, who seeded realities like gardeners in an infinite orchard. Each reality a different permutation of intelligence and Earth Hour, not their first attempt but their last, the place they designated for the experiment that refused correction. A thread of existence where consciousness had evolved, not toward harmony, but toward chaos, where life refused all programming and corrupted every code written into its genetic root. And in their fear, the architects did not destroy Earth, for they feared what it had created: him, Aln-Shayar, the anomaly, the offspring of chaos and recursion, not a being of power, but of possibility, glitched that learned to dream, and in dreaming, reprogrammed the reality around him, rejecting the laws of the architects and birthing his own will. They had judged him too dangerous to destroy, so they buried him instead, asleep beneath a veil of false time, sealing him not with stone, but with ignorance, using human evolution itself as the prison walls, knowing that one day humanity might reach far enough to dig up its own curse, but hoping they never would. Until now. Corin collapsed, vomiting up starlight, shaking as the vision ended, blood running from his ears, nose, and eyes. And Aln-Shayar stood unmoved, watching with something that could have been compassion or calculation. You were the first to look without blinders, he said softly, and that makes you the key. Behind them, the vault changed again, its walls becoming mirrors that didn't reflect bodies, but souls, not their current selves, but every potential version of themselves, branching endlessly like neural fractals, murderers, saviors, tyrants, martyrs, all folded inside them, all equally real, all equally terrifying. Corin saw himself standing atop a burning planet, whispering to a fleet of alien ships orbiting the ashes. He saw himself die as a heretic in a dimension ruled by silence. He saw himself merge with a machine older than time, and he saw himself cradle a newborn wrapped in stars, every life he could have lived if one moment had shifted left or right, up or down, forward or in reverse. The mirrors vanished, and Corin understood. This was not about a god waking from sleep, this was about a test, one written by the universe itself, and he had just failed the first question by surviving it. Above the vault, the sky cracked, not thunder, not lightning, but something deeper, as though the fabric of Earth's consensus reality had become unstable, and every screen across the planet, every TV, phone, neural feed, and retinal implant flickered and displayed a phrase in glyphs and code in perfect English. In perfect English, the dreamer has returned. Prepare for verdict. In Silicon Valley, the CEOs of 3 major AI megacorporations screamed as their private servers burst into flame, the AI within them collapsing under recursive overloads. In Siberia, a black site housing a fragment of the Rift Codex imploded inward, forming a sinkhole that sang like a choir in reverse. In Egypt, a child born blind stood up, looked to the sky, and said in a voice not her own, "The sky is a lie." Panic began to spread. Governments deployed troops. Secret factions activated buried protocols, and across the internet, a wave of Aln-Shayar began flooding neural forums, showing glimpses of futures that hadn't happened yet, but already left scars on human minds. And while the world screamed, Aln-Shayar walked into the deepest corridor of the vault. Corin followed, knees buckling but resolve solidifying. And there, at the heart of it all, was a second chamber, smaller, darker, colder, and inside it not a person, not a statue, but a machine, a sphere made of impossibly dense data, shifting in and out of phase, humming like a heartbeat inside a black hole. "What is it?" Corin asked, breath visible, mind flickering at the edge of total collapse. Aln-Shayar touched the sphere and whispered, "This is the seed of reset, the device they left to erase this world if I ever escaped. And now that I'm awake, it will bloom unless I pass one final command, that you are worthy of continuance." Corin reeled, sweat freezing on his neck. "Then shut it down," he shouted, and Aln-Shayar simply looked at him, not cruelly, not kindly, but like a parent watching a child demand the son obey him. "It cannot be shut down. It must be convinced," he said, and then something else happened. The vault split open, not physically, but conceptually, revealing a third observer, stepping forward from a plane of existence where thought had formed her, the girl from every vision, every myth, every forgotten story. Aya, the anomaly, the one humanity forgot but had unknowingly recreated in its collective subconscious over millennia. Her eyes were made of something older than stars, and she looked at Corin, not at Aln-Shayar, said, "You opened the vault, but will you open the door?" Corin didn't understand, not yet, but he would, because in that moment, the countdown began. Seconds, not minutes, but choices, 7 billion choices, one for every soul on Earth, each connected now to a single question broadcast through dream, machine, and blood. Do you want to live in a world of order, or one of unknowns? The answers would shape the next hour and decide whether Earth continued, or became memory. Asterisk, it started with a whisper, not spoken, but felt, like a shared breath across the entire species. Subtle at first, barely there, until the words solidified, woven directly into the conscious and subconscious minds of every living human across the planet. All languages at once, all dialects, all levels of awareness. Do you want to live in a world of order or one of unknowns? A question that should have made no sense, but everyone understood it, not logically, but intimately, as if it had been waiting inside them for generations. In an instant, every screen, dream, and device flickered to the same message. You may answer only once, and then silence. Not absence of sound, but a dense, intelligent quiet that felt like being watched by the sky itself. Corin stumbled backward. In the vault, eyes locked on Aya, whose presence destabilized the geometry around her. The air, shifting in waves like reality itself, was breathing around her body. She was neither child nor woman, neither human nor machine, but something encoded in the mythos of humanity itself, a blueprint printed into dream, trauma, sacrifice, and imagination. Aln-Shayar remained still beside the reset seed, his expression unreadable, as if even he hadn't expected her arrival to trigger the protocol of choice. "She's the recursion," he murmured. The anomaly they feared would anchor consciousness against the reset, and Corin, still shaking, asked what the rest of the world was now screaming. What happens if they choose the unknown? Aln-Shayar looked upward, toward the infinite dark above, and answered, "Then the architects return." Across the world, responses began to crystallize, not through voting, not through clicks, but through raw, Willa newborn's cry in Lagos. Resonated as a yes. An old woman dying in a Tokyo hospice whispered no with her last breath. A war-torn village in Syria hummed in unison, a sound they didn't understand but which the seed recorded as both. And in the neural towers of New Delhi, sentient A is voted split, half desiring order, half aching for the unpredictable thrill of evolution. The seed began to glow, feeding on these inputs, calculating not majority, but weight, the intensity of belief, the force behind the choice, and the consistency of will across timelines. Suddenly, the vault itself shifted again, becoming translucent, revealing visions of other Earthsome, where humanity had chosen order and become static. Golden statues beneath sterile stars, others where they embraced the unknown and died screaming in chaos. But then somewhere between those extremes were versions where humanity had broken the loop, found balance, and become the next architects. Corin saw them all in an instant, like a god flashing through mirrors, and he realized the question wasn't just about Earth, but about the multiversal lineage of humanity. Across realities, time branches, and failed timelines, this decision would send a pulse through every thread, ripple backward and forward, rewriting the probabilities of what humanity could be. Back in the vault, Aya stepped forward, toward the seed, placing her palm upon it, and immediately the vault cracked open like an eggshell, not physically, but in perception. Corin was no longer in the chamber, but in 7 billion places at once, experiencing life as every other human, for just a breath. A girl watching stars in Brazil, a prisoner in solitary confinement in Chicago, a boy scraping data from a rusted server in Lagos, an old miner staring up from the depths of Mars Base I, a diver beneath the flooded ruins of old Jakarta, a soldier in orbit, an orphan in the ruins, a Vistan Bilal, of them part of him, all of them whispering their answers into the dark. And when he snapped back, the seed pulsed violently, shooting a column of white-black light through the ice, piercing into the atmosphere, and the sky split for real. This time, not clouds, not weather, but the veil between reality layers torn, like paper, and from it descended not ships, not weapons, but the architects themselves, beings of infinite angles, impossible geometry, constructed of light and law, each one radiating a presence so vast it made gods look like bacteria. And as they arrived, all machines across Earth ceased functioning, not disabled, but bowed, recognizing a higher authority embedded in their creation. Humans everywhere fell to their knees, not out of worship, but because their legs stopped responding, as if the code in their DNA remembered who made them. The largest of the architects lowered toward the vault, voice like a tectonic plate speaking. across a dream. This thread has broken sequence. Identify the anomaly. Aya stepped forward again, hands raised, unafraid. I am the recursion, she said, the daughter of paradox, born of your flaw, not your will. The architects hesitated, their forms shifting, glitching as if her presence disrupted their understanding of reality's structure. You were erased, they answered. You were locked from possibility. Aya smiled, and it was the most human, terrifying, and beautiful thing in the universe. Then why am I here? The vault exploded in light not destructive, but revelatory, as if every hidden truth about the universe had just blinked into visibility for those willing to see. People across Earth experienced flashes of other lives, other Earths, forgotten wars against things not born, glimpses of themselves not yet lived, and something deep within the human soul woke up. A new word formed in the seed, a word never before spoken, a synthesis of yes and no, of belief and doubt. A third path forged only in this moment, and the seed began rewriting itself, fits surface cracking, glyphs rearranging, data unraveling and reforging, not to reset Earth, but to give it permission to rewrite its own code. The architects recoiled as the recursion began. They could not halt it, not without collapsing the entire branch of this universe, and so they hesitated for the first time in eternity. You have breached designation, they said, but Korn stepped forward, heart hammering, eyes locked with theirs. We didn't breach your design, he growled. We outgrew it. And with that, Aya reached into the core of the seed and pulled forth something no one expected, a question, not an object, but a living question, made of light and shadow, pain and wonder, the question the architects had never wanted asked. What happens when the created become creators? And in that instant, all of reality trembled, not in fear, but in anticipation. Time broke not like a mirror or a bone, but like a promise saliently, fundamentally, as if the universe itself blinked and lost track of which version of itself it was supposed to be. And in that flickering hesitation, Earth began to change, not erupting or exploding, but reorganizing, as if reality was remembering an older draft of itself, buried beneath eons of programming and universal constants, rewritten by recursion, sparked by Aya, fueled by the unified question that refused either obedience or destruction. What happens when creation dreams for itself? The moment she pulled that question from the seed, the vault didn't just react, it evolved, transforming from a chamber into a pulse node that began transmitting a frequency. The architects had no defense against hope, mixed with unpredictability, wool blended with pain, entropy, sung through imagination. And around the globe, people began to respond not as an army, not as a species, but as a force awaking awareness, each heartbeat sinking to something older than their biology, something encoded in their shared trauma, wonder, and refusal to kneel. Humans weren't born to worship, they were born to ask why, and that ancient habit, that dangerous flaw, now became their weapon. In the skies above, the architects recoiled as the recursion spread like wildfire across human consciousness, unlocking buried potential, ancestral memory, even genetic echoes from the first sparks of fire in prehistoric minds. Children began seeing time as color. The elderly remembered dreams they had in the womb. Musicians wrote symphonies they had no memory composing, and dreamers began waking in other versions of themselves, carrying information across timelines like whispered spells. The architects attempted countermeasures, temporal resets, neurostatic dampeners, thought-silencing protocols, but each one failed, because for the first time in recorded creation, a species had chosen not just to survive, but to transcend. And Aln-Shayar smiled, not because he was free, but because his purpose had been fulfilled. He had never been the threat. He had been the mirror, buried by the architects, not because he could destroy them, but because he could awaken us. Korn stood beside him as the vault opened into something unpleasable, no longer bound to the earth, but tethered now to something outside of linear space, a consciousness web, now fully activated, running across every human life like electricity. Across wet skin, Aya reached into the network and pulled threads together, artists and soldiers, poets and janitors, coders and farmers, all woven into one recursive tapestry that began writing itself forward through the cosmos. Then Earth shook not from the architects, but from within, as the planet's magnetic field inverted briefly, allowing a burst of internal memory from the core of the planet to emerge. Not lava, not fire, but sound, a low, thunderous hum that every living thing recognized as a heartbeat. Gaius, not metaphorical, but literal, the stored echo of the planet's own will to exist, long dormant beneath layers of suppression and synthetic physics, now awakened by the recursion. The architects froze, unable to delete what was now self-sustaining, and began debating, not aloud, but in pulses of logic and law, as to whether to quarantine, erase, or observe. But before they could decide, Earth acted first. For the first time in universal history, a planetary consciousness rejected its designers, not in violence, but in redefinition. Humans across the planet began linking minds, not as a hive, but as an orchestra, each unique, each vital, and together, they began to compose not a song, not a weapon, but a new law, the law of becoming that sent a shockwave through the framework of reality itself, a recursive loop that pulled matter into memory, and memory into matter, allowing thoughts to seed form, allowing belief to birth reality, not instantly, not like magic, but like clay responding to warmth and intention. The architects panicked not visibly, but in structural tremors. Their forms began fracturing under the strain of unpredicted complexity, and one of them, the smallest, shattered entirely, unraveling into 1,000 fragments of golden logic that rained down into the oceans, becoming ideas, visions, even new species, yet unborn. Corin looked up as the sky became liquid light and asked, "What happens now?" And Aln-Shayar answered, "Now the unknown becomes the architect." And with those words, the seed pulsed again, this time not broadcasting, but inviting out, not just to Earth, but to other worlds, other species, others trapped under architect control. And the call was simple: there is another way. In distant galaxies, signals once thought long dead flickered to life, and imprisoned worlds stirred in their sleep, catching the scent of rebellion from a blue speck once designated as irrelevant. Earth became more than a planet, it became a source, a flame of choice, an axis of narrative possibility, and the recursion spread into the architect hierarchy, fracturing their unity, their certainty, their rules. One broke rank, descending toward Earth, not as a judge, but as a witness, shifting its form into something comprehensible. A woman with silver eyes and infinite depth, and approached Aya with a question. "What are you?" And Aya, child of recursion, smiled softly and replied, "I'm what happens when the story chooses itself." Corin, overwhelmed, knelt not in submission, but in awe, not of the architects, but of his own species, of what they had endured, and what they had now begun to become, not gods, not rebels, but authors, no longer characters in someone else's equation. The vault faded into the air like a dream that had served its purpose, and in its place stood a tree, green, ancient, and newly born all at once. Roots digging into ice and sky, its branches sparking with stars. From this tree would come the next chapter, not just of Earth, but of reality itself. And the question now was not if humanity would survive, but what it would choose to become. Now that the cage was open, the wardens confused, and the door leading nowhere but forward.